There are few things more disappointing than watching a good idea go to waste, be it a unique gameplay mechanic that's bungled in spectacular fashion, or the best story concept in the world coming out as unwatchable garbage. And a good idea gone to waste is a fairly efficient description of The Order 1886. The game is about an alternate history Victorian London where King Arthur's knights live on as a group of secret agents protecting England from threats natural and supernatural. They've got an arsenal of steampunk weapons, and they use the water of the Holy Grail to give their knights healing powers and allow them to live for centuries. The protagonist is Sir Galahad, an agent of the Order who tracks down a werewolf infestation in London with a team of other knights. So how did such a kick-ass premise turn out as one of the more infamous and reviled games on the PlayStation 4? Well, the game was in development hell for 5 years, and during that time, the Order went from being a supposedly co-op werewolf hunting shooter to being, none of that. Gameplay is every stock cover-based third-person shooter that's been released in the last decade. You played Gears of War or any of the 1,000 games that ripped it off, then you've already played a better version of this. Levels are strictly linear, with zero exploration. You walk forward until you hit a room with enemies, you take cover on one side of the room, the enemies take cover on the other side, and the gameplay is just shooting the ducks at the shooting gallery. Your arsenal is built out of the most generic modern shooter weapons imaginable. You've got a few generic pistols, 2 generic rifles, generic sniper rifle, generic machine gun, and generic shotgun that you will never use because cover-based shooters by nature revolve around ranged combat. Why are these still a thing? All of the cool weapons are either useless or only appear one time in the entire game. Explosive weapons have absolutely pathetic splash damage, so the rocket launcher and grenade launcher you get for one encounter apiece both take about 3 shots to kill the one guy you're aiming at. Ditto for the thermite rifle, which has the added benefit of its burst being wildly inconsistent before the splash damage sucks shit. The only cool weapon in the game is the arc gun, which charges for a few seconds, and then it automatically one-shots an enemy in your field of view. This gun rocks! So of course you only get it for one short level, and then you never see it again until the last firefight. The gameplay never evolves beyond pop out of cover, shoot, pop back, and compared to other staples of the genre, it doesn't even do that well. Your cover will often block the camera so you can't see jack, the controls are super stiff with slow turning and shitty movement speed, the game often barely gives you enough ammo to get through encounters in order to encourage you to scavenge for weapons, in a gameplay style where there's almost always a no man's land hail of bullets between you and the nearest weapon drop. Enemies will arbitrarily not spawn until you wander to a specific part of the room so they can spawn around you for an ambush. There's an arbitrary stealth level where you die the instant a single enemy sees you. The game limits you to only 2 weapons, 1 rifle and 1 handgun, severely limiting your weapon choice even more than this bullshit usually does. There's a mechanic where you could save yourself from dying by drinking some of the Order's Grail water, and I was halfway through the game before I learned this because I kept dying before I had the option of using it. Trying to perform a close range or sneak attack on an enemy fails and kills you instantly if you screw up the quick time event with careful timing. I've had Galahad exit cover when I was trying to slide along a wall for a different line of sight. The take cover button stopped working in one level, and the partner AI is completely useless. Room's clear, Igraine. This last guy's all yours. Oh, I get it. You're shooting at the wall so it collapses on the guy and that'll kill him. Clever. You know what? I got him. The one thing I admire about the gameplay is that when you die, you respawn at your last checkpoint a few seconds later. There's no obnoxiously long loading screen like in all the other shooters I've played lately. It's immensely convenient, and it makes me wonder why no other shooters have cracked this technology. But the main thing that drags down the gameplay is the stupid AI and lack of enemy variety. Enemies make zero attempt to outflank or surround you, and normal enemies will never charge your position. Enemies shuffle left and right until you knock them down, and that's it. Hell, I've been pinned down and had enemies reach my position, only to watch as they immediately turn around and run back to their main cover.
I'm a dog chasing cars. I wouldn't know what to do with one if I caught it.
There's even a level where you're supposed to keep the enemies away from a door, and I swear the enemies were completely unaware that they were supposed to reach said door. I've caught enemies unloading several whole magazines into walls, and I've seen grenadier enemies consistently miss so badly that it was physically impossible for me to get hit by them. But the real problem is that there's only, 5 distinct enemy types in the game, and 3 of them are rare. The overwhelming vast majority of the time, you're just fighting boring-ass basic enemies armed with boring-ass basic guns. There's almost no variety, and the boring array of enemies and the bog-standard boring arsenal of guns just make the action so definitively mediocre. It's just the most stock and uninteresting gameplay that you could imagine. The one quasi-innovation that the game could think of was the Shotgunner, the cheapest ass enemy shit swizzler you've ever seen that will have you cursing the day you saw this shit in the Walmart's bargain bin. The Shotgunner charges you, and then he kills you instantly, because the first shotgun blast stuns you for several seconds so you can't flee or fight back, and the second shot kills you immediately. You turn and move so slowly it's difficult to catch them even if you can see them coming. They take several hits to kill, and sometimes they wear armor so that it takes over 2 full magazines to the face to kill them. They seem to be wearing chainmail, and it's just too bad the Mythbusters are off the air, because I'd be curious to see if chainmail can actually stop a bullet, let alone 40 of them. Sometimes they give a dude with armor a machine gun or thermite rifle, so he just stands there out in the open, mowing you down, shrugging off all of your bullets. Fun times! Maybe once per level you'll see a completely ineffectual sniper and grenade-launching douche, and that just leaves the actual werewolves that you fight. 3 times in the entire game counting the tutorial. In a game marketed around hunting werewolves. 3 werewolves spawn in the level, never mixed with other enemies. You shoot at one as it slowly charges in a straight line at you, it runs away, and then it charges the same direction at you again. You have this exact piss-easy fight 3 times. Also, they teleport. See, this one here charges at me in this corner. There's nowhere else that he can go because I'm wedged in a corner with no other paths, and yet he's gone! How do he do that? But the slow-paced shoot at a slow single-target werewolf fights are still way better than when the game tries to have bosses. The 2 times you fight a werewolf as a boss, you just press an attack button and press a direction on the control pad when a prompt appears. The only 2 bosses in the game are glorified quick-time event sequences, and dirt simple ones at that. This is the best that they could think of, and that's beside the point that you only have 5 brief fights with werewolves in a sea of bland as shit cover-based shooting against normal humans. But gameplay isn't the main issue with the Order 1886, it's the lack thereof. I'd estimate out of the 6-hour length of the game, maybe 3 of those hours are actual shooting, 3.5 at most. 2 of those hours are cutscenes, and 1 hour is you walking through empty corridors doing nothing, locked down to a turtle's movement speed so you can appreciate just how darn pretty the game is. Yeah, this is the best looking PS4 game I've ever seen. Can I do something now? The Order 1886 is the latest in a long line of games trying to be a combination of a game and a movie, because some thick shits in the games industry still haven't figured out that that's a bad idea from literally every other time it's been attempted! The game has black bars at the top and bottom of the screen for a theatrical aspect ratio, there's a film grain over the graphics, hell, the first level of the game is you slowly walking through a series of halls, being given honest-to-God tutorials for quick-time events. Who's the recently unthawed caveman that needs tutorials to explain push the button that appears on the screen? Trying to be half a video game and half a movie is a doomed venture. You only get 2 or 3 shootouts before the game grinds to a halt for cutscenes, often 10 to 15 straight minutes of cutscenes. Every time the game shows a scene of the Order's Council debating something, it's like 10 minutes of the most boring, irrelevant shit, and it kills the pacing. Plus, the game constantly drops all of your guns during cutscenes, even across a single level. Meanwhile, the game's cinematic plot has to keep grinding to a halt for half an hour at a time to fit in levels, like the level where you spend a solid 30 minutes walking to a single objective while the person leading you there chants "We're almost there" the entire damn way. Neither half of the formula works. The game is just saddled with constant major abrupt shifts in pacing, and the game doesn't flow at all. But what makes the logistical nightmare of trying to combine a game and a movie together even worse is that the movie sucks! The game's plot is a complete and utter train wreck. It plays like the script went through so many rewrites that they just lost track of most of the story. Plot threads continually come out of nowhere, drop out of the game entirely, or outright contradict one another. The game begins with Galahad escaping prison when it turns out he's fleeing from the Order as a convicted traitor. During the escape, Galahad and the guards remark that Galahad is sick with something.
Walking dead, that's what you are.
You forget, Lord Chancellor. I'm as good as dead already.
So Galahad gets betrayed and gets infected with being a werewolf. You know, there's a fine line between building suspense and just flat out spoiling the entire story. The game then cuts to a month earlier as Galahad and his pupil/lover lady Igraine fight some rebels in a tutorial level. Who are the rebels? What's their ideology? What are they rebelling against? Not explained.
I must admit, you do move fast for a man of your age.
Oh yeah, that's funny. You're telling me which of us can actually hit a target at 20 paces? Several werewolves are found in the rebel ranks, and the rebels are massing in Whitechapel, but the Chancellor of the Order forbids anybody from investigating Whitechapel for reasons they'd never even attempt to explain. So Galahad investigates in secret with Igraine, the requisite female love interest, Lafayette the Marquis, the requisite foreign guy who doubles as the requisite womanizer, and Percival, the requisite grizzled mentor who will die or turn evil. Brief side note here, Nikola Tesla is Q from the James Bond movies, and Lafayette and the rebel leaders are apparently real-life revolutionaries. Whenever the game name drops famous people, they either have nothing in common with their real-life counterparts, look it up, Lafayette de Marquis was not a poonhound, and or they have nothing to do with the plot, so it all comes off as completely pointless, if not pretentious. Galahad catches Percival talking to a random guy in a big cloak twice. This is never brought up again. You learn the rebels have acquired Order weapons. This is also never brought up again. The rebel headquarters is crawling with werewolves. This will be important later. After a few blatant filler levels, you fight your way through the rebel headquarters and uncover a plot to assassinate Lord Hastings, one of the Order's council members. Lord Hastings already has a bodyguard, Sir Lucan, but he's useless and doesn't help you at all in the next levels, so Galahad's team boards an airship to stop the assassination. You save Lord Hastings, but the rebels have a backup plan and blow the airship's engines. Everybody evacuates, but Percival dies in an explosion trying to talk down one of the rebels. The Chancellor is quick to condemn Galahad's group for going against orders because... yeah, how dare they save hundreds of civilian lives and prevent a high-profile assassination? What assholes! The rebels attack Lord Hastings again, and in the only fun level in the game, Galahad loses his fudge and goes full strike commando, slaughtering the entire strike force. Galahad beats a confession out of a dude to find out where the rebel leader is hiding, and this is the exact point in the game where the plot just starts to shit itself inside out. Galahad meets the rebel leader Lakshmi, and for no real reason, he asks what the rebels' deal is, rather than repaint the place in her brain matter. Lakshmi says the United India Trading Company is bad, and the rebels are trying to bring the company down. This after the game directly stated earlier that the rebels were simple anarchists. From this point on, the United India Trading Company serves as the game's antagonists, and the game never explains dick about them. They built the airship from the previous level, and they have their own army, and that's it. That's the sum total of what we're told about the game's main villains. We're never told what they do or why they're so powerful. If you want any context or information about the game's main villains, you're just expected to research the real-life East India Trading Company that they're based on, and it's not a good sign when understanding the fundamental aspects of the game's plot requires homework. Alternatively, you could just rewatch the second and third Pirates of the Caribbean movies where the East India Trading Company were the villains. It'd take almost as long as a playthrough of The Order, and probably be more fun. And now, it's time for everyone's favorite game show, You're a Dumbass! Contestant number 1 this fine day is Sir Galahad. Lakshmi refuses to tell Galahad why the company is evil, but she insists she's got evidence to show him. Galahad then decides to follow the rebels he's never met and loathed with a passion to an undisclosed location without telling anybody in the Order what he's doing. He also ditches all of his gear and his communicator before leaving, ensuring he cannot call for help if they find something big or the rebels he's been slaughtering all week betray him. Congratulations, Galahad! You're a dumbass! Contestant number 2 is Lakshmi. Come on down! Lakshmi refuses to tell Galahad why the United India Company is evil, and taking him to see the evidence involves leading Galahad through the most densely populated with civilian guard areas that she could find. She apparently expects the knight, whose rebel body count is safely into triple digits, to suddenly trust the rebels enough to mow down dozens of civilians because a suspicious woman told him to. Congratulations, Lakshmi! You're a dumbass! But oh, it looks like we have a third contestant on today's show. Why, it's Lady Igraine. Lady Igraine is Sir Galahad's pupil and lover. They've worked together for literal centuries, and she's just watched him cut down more rebels than your average Star Destroyer. But she sees him with the rebel leader, and she immediately decides that Galahad is a traitor. Doesn't give the partner and lover she's been with for hundreds of years the benefit of the doubt for one solitary second. Congratulations, Igraine. You too are a dumbass! Big round of applause for all of our contestants today. We now return you to your poorly written drivel. So it turns out Lord Hastings actually runs the United India Company, using the company to ship vampires all over the world and using his influence with the Order to cover up the company's misdeeds. Not only do we not know one solitary thing about Lord Hastings, who just got upgraded to the game's main villain, but this is the first time it's been so much as hinted that vampires even exist in this world the entire game. Who thought it was a good idea to make it a big twist that the guy we know nothing about is using the company we know nothing about to ship things we didn't know existed? You remember how they hammered through the first half of the game that werewolves were working with the rebels? Well, werewolves attack Lakshmi and Galahad in the warehouse on sight, and werewolves being allied with the rebels are never seen or mentioned again. The game directly contradicts what the first entire half of the game was establishing without a word of explanation. While we're pulling blatant retcons on stuff that happened 2 hours ago, it turns out the rebels didn't attack the airship to kill Lord Hastings. They planned on bringing down the entire ship the whole time to stop a shipment of vampires. So why did they have a dedicated assassination force to kill Lord Hastings if they were just going to blow the whole ship and kill him in the explosion anyway? To cap off this expositional onslaught, Lord Hastings is also a vampire and Jack the Ripper. Despite Jack the Ripper's MO having nothing to do with vampire attacks, all of Jack's murders occurred in 1888, and there are scenes where Lord Hastings clearly stands in broad daylight, and he's perfectly fine. Is this the legacy of Twilight? Vampires don't have to follow any rules anymore? If you were hoping the game's collectible audio logs would shed some light on this infuriatingly vague lore, yeah, dream on. These logs have the most pointless, related to nothing background non-information, and never tell you anything remotely relevant to the story. Ditto for every scrap of paper you can pointlessly pick up and examine and glean zero information from them. Upon discovering vampires in the company warehouse, Galahad immediately sets the entire warehouse on fire, obliterating any evidence of the company's wrongdoing and ensuring he'll get caught in a sea of civilian corpses with dick to show for it. By sheer force of luck, Galahad doesn't get caught, and he decides to raid the company's mansion for proof about the vampires. Proof he'd already have if he weren't stupid. He needs somebody that he trusts to go on this raid with him, so he turns to the obviously corrupt Chancellor you could have bet money wouldn't believe him. He doesn't go to Lady Igraine, quite literally the one person on Earth he should trust. In fact, when Igraine confronts him about the rebels, he brushes her off and goes out of his way to act as suspicious as possible. So instead of the competent allies from earlier in the game, he gets stuck with Sir Lucan, and he calls in Lakshmi. Because exactly what you need when you're suspected of being a rebel is to openly conspire with rebels. So Sir Lucan, another character we barely know a single thing about, who's barely been on screen and is more or less a total stranger, betrays Galahad to Lord Hastings. This is supposed to be a twist. Oh, and Lucan's a werewolf also. How badly does the Order suck that a vampire and a werewolf were able to infiltrate the Order's command and none of the highly trained werewolf and vampire hunters noticed? Igraine and Lafayette take Galahad prisoner, he's put on trial and sentenced to death, all while making absolutely zero effort to explain himself to his friends, defend himself to the Order. He never at any point makes any attempt to warn the Order about the company's vampires or explain that the Order that they're being run by a vampire and a werewolf.
Has conspired with godless rebels. He has presumed to take the life of our esteemed Chamberlain, Lord Hastings.
I saw Sir Galahad in the company of the rebel leader.
He hurled a number of senseless accusations at the United India Company.
Guilty.
Speak! Point at Lord Hastings and yell that fucker's a vampire! Galahad has not made a single intelligent decision for over an hour of game time. He's long since passed the too stupid to live threshold and long since lost any sympathy as a character. Dude becomes a complete moron to force the plot that the writers had in mind. So despite several heavy allusions that Galahad was infected in the game's opening, he's perfectly fine before and after his imprisonment. Almost like that was a subplot that was cut from the game and they said screw it and left it in anyway. Tesla rescues Galahad and delivers him to the rebels. Yep, Tesla was secretly working for the rebels the whole time. He doesn't use his influence in the Order to get a few allies. This is the only useful thing we ever see him do. Also, Tesla meets with a hooded man. This is never mentioned again. Igraine finds where Galahad was recovering from the escape and she swears bloody vengeance upon the rebels. There's a heavy emphasis that she's only mad that Galahad was spotted with Lakshmi that one time. Because, yeah, Woman Scorned is just a great direction to take with the only female knight character. Meanwhile, Lafayette appears and says that he still believes in Galahad and that he'll fight beside him in the coming battles. And Galahad still doesn't tell him what he's doing with the rebels! Tell your ally what's going on, you bottomlessly stupid dolt! So the rebels are gearing up for a major offensive, and a ship of new vampires is about to set sail for America. But before joining the rebels, Galahad declares that he needs to go rescue Tesla. For reasons he never explains. This just happens. He doesn't know if Tesla is in trouble. He just abruptly decides out of nowhere that he needs to go save him for no damn reason. But then Lucan shows up in Tesla's lab for no damn reason as well, so hell if I know. You subdue Lucan in a sucky quick-time event fight when suddenly the Chancellor walks in. He knew Lucan was a werewolf since he was a kid, but he covered it up to somehow protect the Order. Because someone thought that made sense. The Chancellor kicks Galahad out of the Order, but he lets Galahad pop a cap in Lucan's face and get away. Wait, why is the title on the screen? Wait, no, this can't be. Why are the credits rolling? No, I am not shitting you. The game cuts off the second you kill Lucan. That's the end! What about Lord Hastings, the main villain about which the entire plot revolves? You'd never fight him. You'd never even put a dent in his operations. That vampire shipment headed to America in a day or two? Yeah, that was never mentioned again. Igraine's jealously fueled vendetta against the rebels? She never appears again. Lafayette joining Galahad for the upcoming fight? He drops out of the game right after that scene. They're werewolves that were working with the rebels and then they weren't. The entire Order being under a corrupt company's control. The cloaked guys who kept talking to Tesla and Percival. Galahad being a fugitive, the secret agenda Percival tells you about at the start of the airship levels, the Chancellor's reasons for keeping the Knights from investigating the rebels when he has no connection to the rebels, and I know there are other plot threads I'm forgetting about that were just dropped at a moment's notice with this cluster clock. All we did was kill one henchman who wasn't even that relevant to the plot, and it ends with the main character having accomplished nothing! The best you get is a mid-credit scene where the Knights declare martial law, and Galahad does his best Batman looking over the city impression, because why not throw another unresolved plot thread onto this dumpster fire of an ending? And before you say, oh, they ran out of time and had to cut the game off early, it's not their fault, maybe they had no choice, bullshit! Before the last level, Galahad decides, out of nowhere and for no reason, to go visit Tesla so the fight with Lucan can happen. They had enough advance notice the game was ending to cobble together a final level and final cutscenes, and they still didn't resolve a single damn thing from the main story. They were so damn certain this was going to be the next big Mega Million franchise that they purposefully left a half-dozen major plot threads completely unresolved. Don't worry, we'll tell a real story on all those sequels that we're totally going to get. By the way, the dev team and publisher have parted ways and there's most likely never going to be a sequel. Funny how shit works out! So that's The Order 1886, a totally kick-ass premise, completely wasted on stock, boring gameplay, and an utterly abysmal story that plays like a 6-hour prologue for an actual game that's never getting made. The only use this pile of pig vomit has is to serve as a masterclass in how not to start a franchise, as the sheer arrogance of filling the story with holes you're totally going to fill in later feels nothing less than insulting. I mean, just cutting the game off before the third act? What are you, the devil inside? I mean, how would you feel if I couldn't be bothered to write an ending for this video, so I just cut to black in mid-sentence?